Someone cites a statistic and draws a conclusion from it that's harmful. You go to fact check the statistic and it turns out it's true. Now what? Well, it turns out not all bad information is the same. Today, I want to talk about the difference between misinformation, disinformation, and malinformation. Let's make it make sense.
I was up in Harlem a few weeks ago, and I actually had dinner with Al Sharpton, and we went to Sylvia's, a very famous restaurant in Harlem. And I couldn't get over the fact that there was no difference between Sylvia's restaurant and any other restaurant in New York City. I mean, it was exactly the same, even though it's run by blacks, primarily black patronship. It was the same. There wasn't one person in Sylvia's who was screaming MFer, I want more iced tea.
Please.
You know, I mean, everybody was, it was like going into an Italian restaurant in an all-white suburb, in the sense of people were sitting there and they were ordering and having fun, and there wasn't any kind of craziness at all.
Now, the reason I want to make a distinction between these is because not only is not all bad information the same, but it's not used for the same thing. I want to build a categorization so that you know how to identify each one and what to do when you see it. Specifically, also to know why they're being used. Let's start with misinformation, which is the one that most people use. Most people use misinformation as like an umbrella term. That's a problem because, like, depending on the word that you're using, that's going to determine what defense you have against the thing that's being done. So if you think that everything is misinformation, you start fact checking everything. But some of the most dangerous information you're going to come across is based on something that's accurate. So what happens is the fact checking doesn't help you. You need something different. You need to reframe the conversation. So misinformation is false, inaccurate information that's shared without an intent to deceive. The person that's spreading the misinformation, like, actually believes it. Here's an example: benevolent racism. When a person says, wow, to a black person, you're so articulate, they genuinely believe they're saying something nice. Oh, you're really good at math for a black person. It doesn't connect to them that black people can do math. It's not something that's weird. They actually think they're paying a compliment because they don't think they're mistaken to have that belief. I don't see color. When somebody says, I don't see color, they don't realize that they're sounding ignorant. They think they're saying something cool. People who say this think they're being progressive. They think they're being inclusive. There's no, like, they don't have a conscious, malicious intent. You know what I mean? They're operating based on this false belief about race, how it works, what it means, and what do compliments mean when they go from one racial power structure to another. Also, what does it cost someone when they receive that compliment? So the information that they have about race and how it works is wrong. Their intent isn't hostile, but the harm, the impact, that's real no matter what. So the key point here is that misinformation is an accuracy issue. The fix to misinformation is correction. It's education. Now, who gives that education? That's up for grabs. But that's the fix. Once that person has better information and they acquire it, they can update their beliefs. I mean, that's the optimistic scenario, but that's the idea.
We begin today's show looking at a major provision in President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID relief bill that aims to address decades of discrimination against Black, Hispanic, Native American, and Asian American farmers who've historically been excluded from government agricultural programs. The American Rescue Plan sets aside $10.4 billion for agriculture support and allocates about half the funds to farmers of color who are, quote, subjected to racial or ethnic prejudice because of their identity as members of a group, unquote. The U.S. Commission on Civil Rights confirmed as long ago as 1965 the U.S. Department of Agriculture discriminated against black farmers, but little was done to address the problem.
100 years ago?
Yeah, most happy about the new policy. These people. So, yeah. I'm gonna buy a plow, man.
I'm gonna plant that corn.
Go get a John Deere. Barack Obama, mother. I'm the president of plowing that ass. You.
Now let's move on to disinformation. So now disinformation is false, inaccurate information that's shared with a deliberate intent to deceive. Now, the person who's spreading that disinformation knows that they are either wrong or that they haven't made sure that they're right. They're just saying stuff, you know? One example here is overt racism. How often do we hear the word Chicago? Most dangerous city in the world. And then when we go look it up, it's not. Not in the top 10. Not in the top 20. But it's used because Chicago is short for black people. That's why. That's why it's used. And so the person invoking this, they know they haven't looked at statistics. They know they just heard a headline. Some of these people will actually look for sources and look for statistics to back them up on this Chicago nonsense. And they'll present it to you like, look what I found. And then you go to read it and you say, this doesn't say what you just said it says. Hey, did you know the thing about black fathers? This doesn't say what you just said it says. That's disinformation. It's made with that intent and the inaccuracy. Now, disinformation is an intent problem. The fix is exposure. It's accountability. The fix is exposure. It's accountability. But here's the catch. You can't always verify intent from outside. So you got to bring it in. You got to, hey, show me. You have to give it enough rope to do its thing. The way that you prove that the person knows is by just giving them the stage, setting the bar, and letting them demonstrate that they actually have evidence for their claim. If a person thought something was true, had no ill intent, they don't have anything to fear when you go to investigate. But if you bring up somebody who is engaged in disinformation, what they're going to do is they're going to resist this attempt. They're going to stop you at every turn. They're going to lie about the thing that you're both reading. Then you can pinpoint it and say, oh, this person's doing this on purpose. There's your intent.
Now, let's start with a simple fact. Nearly all crime is intra-racial. White on white, black on black, Hispanic on Hispanic. The only group for which that is not true is Asian Americans. But when it comes to black versus white crimes, or white versus black crimes, black Americans are far more likely to be perps than victims. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, citing the National Crime Victimization Survey, in 2019, there were 562,550 interracial crimes concerning blacks and whites. 89,980 of those crimes featured a white perp and a black victim. 472,570 of those crimes featured a black perp and a white victim. In other words, 84% of violent interactions involving black and white people involved black people victimizing white people.
That brings us to the most dangerous of the three, malinformation. Now, some of you may not even have heard that term, but malinformation is accurate or seemingly accurate information that's shared with the intention to cause harm. The deployment here is the weapon. One example, 1350. 1350 is the belief that black people, while being 13% of the population, commit 50% of the violent crime in the United States. Now, there is a statistic that you can cite that seems to show this, and it is real data, and you can display it to the audience as a thing that exists. And when it gets deployed, there is an implication about the inherent nature of Black people as violent, uneducated, prone to being resistant to accountability. Often you might hear people say, "Do you not like statistics?" I'm just stating facts. The context that's being stripped away and the analysis that's being stripped away is the problem. For example, the information that's being cited oftentimes, most times, is incomplete. And there's no accounting for the missing data and how it affects the number. There's context of other statistics that don't get included that are also incomplete. And even in the most generous reading of this information, there are other things like historical issues, socioeconomic conditions, over-policing, et cetera, that all come into play and are not part of the person's analysis. They just cite one thing. Let's look at the FBI and keep it moving. That makes it malinformation. So malinformation is framing and intent. That's the issue. You can't fact check your way out of it because the facts that they're citing, the statistics that they're citing, they're there. The defense for this is getting ahead of it, understanding context, understanding the analysis, framing the analysis as important, interrogating the omissions. Go up front and say, how come you didn't do this extra analysis? What is your methodology for that? And when you do, the reaction you get will tell you what the intent is. Malinformation is the most dangerous because it's the most defensible. It has the most plausible deniability. I'm just asking questions. I'm just giving you data. What's the problem? Why don't you want to talk about this? It seems like you don't want to talk about this. Calling everything misinformation is politically convenient. It's also intellectually lazy. But more importantly, it lets these bad faith actors get away with doing dishonest stuff and robs you of the defense for the dishonest stuff. It's important to be able to tell the difference between these three things and be able to go ahead and mount a defense, get into the conversation. This isn't a semantic, pedantic, academic, hair-splitting thing. This is an important framing. I don't really care what word you use, as long as when you identify the tactic, you deploy the right defense. Misinformation is a mistake. Disinformation is a lie. Malinformation is a knife made out of the truth. Knowing which one you're dealing with is important. It doesn't just change how you respond. It changes whether your response has any chance of working at all. Hopefully, I made that make sense. If you like this, like the video, comment, subscribe, tell your friends, and I'll see you next time.